The pressure at 18,000 feet felt like a living thing, waiting to crush our submersible if even one weld gave way. Down here in the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench, the darkness was absolute, an ancient empty void where our own floodlights provided the only illumination this crushing depth had ever seen.
"Anything on sonar, Patrick?"
David Miller asked. His voice carried the same professional tension we'd all felt since taking on this classified salvage job. I studied the acoustic return, watching a large, unmistakable silhouette take shape through the static. Target acquired, bearing 045, range 180 meters. Copy that. David adjusted our course with smooth skill. Can't believe we're about to make history. A Soviet prototype, lost since the Cold War. The fee for recovering the K-359 Chimera would clear my debts and finally buy that quiet life by the coast. One last dive, then I could leave this crushing blackness behind for good. As we got closer, I frowned at the structural scan display. These integrity readings can't be right. What's it showing? The sub's hull. It's showing near perfect condition. David glanced back, his face ghostly in the instrument glow. That's impossible. Not at this depth, not after decades down here. When our lights finally hit the vessel, we both went dead silent. The Chimera rested on the trench floor like it had only sunk yesterday. No rust, no crushing damage. Its black hull shone under our beams, defying every rule of metal science and physics I'd learned in my 8 Navy years. "Run a full sensor diagnostic," I ordered, my training scrambling for a rational answer. "Confirm pressure gauge readings." David nodded, his expression tight with confusion. 18,212 feet. All readings consistent. He swallowed hard. "This thing, it shouldn't exist like this." Captain Finch's voice crackled through our comms from the surface ship Odyssey. "Report, Triton 4. Have you located the target?" "Affirmative, Captain," I answered, fighting to keep my voice steady. "But the Chimera appears completely intact. No structural damage at all. There's no explanation." A long pause. "Proceed with caution. Complete your survey. Retrieve any ship logs you can access." Following procedure gave me something solid to hold on to, a shield against the crawling sense of wrongness tightening in my gut. We maneuvered the Triton 4 alongside the Chimera and locked on with the magnetic seal. "Suits are good? Oxygen at 100%. David confirmed, ready at the hatch. We climbed into the sub through its emergency entrance, our helmet lights piercing a darkness untouched for decades. What we found inside froze my blood. The submarine wasn't just sound, it was pristine, spotless. But there were no bodies. At every station, each bunk, sat only a neatly folded uniform with a small pile of fine ash beside it, clothes and dust where sailors should have been. "What in God's name could do this?" David whispered, his voice strained in my helmet. I had no answer as we made our way to the command center. On the captain's console lay an open logbook. The final entry, written in precise Russian script, sent a chill down my spine. Project Chimera containment failing. The entity consumes not flesh, but existence itself from human consciousness. My hand shook as I reached for the log. Captain Finch had ordered us to grab all records, but every instinct screamed to get out, to get back to the surface before whatever happened here 40 years ago could happen again. I grabbed the logbook with trembling hands, tucking it securely under my arm. Whatever happened here, whatever this entity was, I didn't want to stick around to find out. "We need to go," I said to David, my voice steadier than I felt. "Let's get these logs back to the Odyssey." David nodded, his face pale under the harsh glow of our headlamps. We retraced our steps through the silent corridors of the Chimera, past those neatly folded uniforms and their accompanying piles of ash. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if something unseen was pressing against us, evaluating us. Back in the airlock of our submersible, I could finally breathe only when the hatch sealed with a reassuring clank. David initiated the detachment sequence and the Triton IV released its grip on the Soviet sub's hull. "Ascending to 1,000 meters for communications check," David announced, his voice all business now that we were back in familiar territory. I nodded, clutching the logbook like a shield. My mind raced through what we'd seen. A perfectly preserved submarine that should have been crushed. Crew members reduced to nothing but ash and clothing. And that final chilling log entry. "The entity consumes not flesh, but existence itself from human consciousness." What did that even mean? How could something consume existence? The submersible hummed around us as we ascended through the crushing darkness. I turned to ask David what he thought of it all, but something strange happened. For a split second, my vision seemed to flicker, like a skipped frame in old film footage. A dizzy spell washed over me, and I gripped the edge of my console. "David, did you—" The words died in my throat. The man sitting at the controls wasn't David Miller. He turned to me with a puzzled expression, this stranger in David's seat. "Did I what, Patrick?" I stared at him, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. He wore our standard issue dive suit, but his face, narrow where David's was round, with a closely trimmed beard and eyes a shade too light, was completely unfamiliar. "Who?" I swallowed, mouth suddenly dry. "Who are you?" The man's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Patrick, it's me, Simon Hayes, tech specialist. Are you feeling all right?" My heart hammered against my ribs. Simon Hayes? There was no Simon Hayes on our crew. I'd known every member of this expedition for months. "Where's David?" I demanded, hearing the panic sharpening my voice. "David?" Simon frowned. "There's no David on this mission, Patrick. It's just been you and me on this dive. Maybe you should check your oxygen levels." I lunged for the comms. "Odyssey, this is Triton IV. Emergency situation." Captain Finch's voice crackled through after a moment. "Triton IV, this is Odyssey. What's your emergency, over?" "Sir," I fought to keep my voice steady. "I boarded the Chimera with David Miller. Now there's someone else in the submersible claiming to be Simon Hayes." A long pause, then, "Patrick, Simon Hayes is your co-pilot. Has been since we left port. Are you experiencing symptoms of nitrogen narcosis?" The rest of our ascent passed in excruciating silence. When we finally docked with the Odyssey, Captain Finch and Dr. Novak, our medic, were waiting. "Patrick," Dr. Novak stepped forward, "I understand you're experiencing some confusion." "I'm not confused," I insisted. "David Miller was my co-pilot. We've worked together for 3 years." In the med bay, every test came back normal. After she released me, I made a beeline for the crew quarters. David's bunk would be there, third on the left, with that tattered paperback copy of The Hunt for Red October that he always joked was professional research. But when I reached the quarters, a cold shock ran through me. The third bunk on the left had Simon's name stenciled on the locker. His personal effects were scattered around: a digital tablet, a worn baseball cap, a framed photo of a woman I didn't recognize. I staggered back, bumping into Finch, who had followed me. "Patrick," he said quietly, "there is no David Miller on this ship, never has been. I've checked the crew manifest, the mission logs, everything." I pushed past him to the bridge and pulled up the crew roster with trembling fingers. Patrick Klein, Robert Finch, Eliza Novak, Simon Hayes, no David Miller. I scrolled frantically through every record we had. Nothing. It was as if David had never existed at all. But I remembered him. Every detail. The way he hummed under his breath when concentrating. How he always double-checked the oxygen seals before a dive. The picture of his pregnant wife tucked in his locker. Back in my bunk that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the horror of the situation sinking in. The entity from the chimera, the one that consumed existence itself from human consciousness. It hadn't just followed us. It had already begun to feed. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's face, the face that no one else remembered. I lay in my bunk until 4 a.m, then slipped out quietly into the dim corridor of the Odyssey. The ship hummed with its usual mechanical heartbeat, but now that sound felt menacing, as if something else pulsed beneath it. I had to find proof that David existed. Something, anything that could tell me I wasn't losing my mind. The crew quarters were silent as I moved through them like a ghost. I checked the duty roster in the mess hall again, running my finger down the laminated sheet. No David Miller. I searched the storage lockers where we kept personal stuff. Nothing with his name. I even risked accessing the ship's computer logs, looking for maintenance reports he'd filed or dive records with his signature. Nothing. It was as if he'd never been born. As I scrolled through the dive logs, something else nagged at me. The crew manifest listed 12 of us for this job, but I could only picture 9 in my head. I tried to remember our pre-dive briefing, the faces around the table. Spaces appeared in my memory, blank spots where people should have been. Trouble sleeping? I nearly jumped out of my skin. Captain Finch stood in the doorway of the computer room, a mug of coffee in his weathered hand. "Just double-checking some data, sir," I said quickly. Finch nodded. "The Chimera's got us all on edge. Those logs you brought up. I've sent the first finds to the company." He took a sip of coffee. "Strange stuff about thoughts and existence. Probably Soviet bullcrap." "Probably," I echoed, but I didn't believe it at all. Finch studied me. "Get some rest, Klein. We need clear heads down here." I watched him leave, relief washing over me. At least the captain was still here, still real, my anchor in this nightmare. I spent the rest of the morning in my bunk, making lists, names, faces, things about each crew member, trying to nail them down in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling I was playing a nasty game of musical chairs, and when the music stopped, someone else would be gone. After my shift watching the Triton 4 systems, I headed to the mess hall. I needed to talk to Finch again to figure out a plan. The thing was aboard, and we needed rules to trap it. The mess was empty except for Simon, who sat alone at a table, eyes glued to his tablet. "Where's the captain?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Simon looked up, his face blank. "Captain of what?" The world tilted beneath my feet. "Captain Finch," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. "Robert Finch." Simon's brow wrinkled. "Pat, you okay? There's no captain on this trip." It's just been us two on this tub. Always has been. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. The room closed in around me, walls pushing. "That's impossible," I whispered. "He and I talked here this morning." "No," Simon said softly, his eyes worried. "You stayed in your bunk all morning. I checked on you around 6 a.m., and you were out cold." The truth hit me hard. The entity wasn't just taking people. It was speeding up. First David, now Finch, and who knew how many others I couldn't remember. And with each one it swallowed, reality rewrote itself quicker. We weren't salvaging anymore. We were sinking with an invisible predator. I was the only one who saw the water rising. I pulled back from Simon immediately, needing space to think. His easy, confident dismissal of Captain Finch scared me more than any deep ocean pressure breach ever could. Whatever was happening was speeding up, and I was running out of time. I walked down the Odyssey's narrow corridors, trying to look normal while my mind raced. I needed a safe spot, somewhere hidden where I could plan. The little maintenance locker near the aft ballast control seemed perfect, small, out of sight, but with a vent grill letting me watch the corridor without being seen. Once inside, I shut the door and flipped the simple latch. The small space was cramped, but felt strangely comforting. Through the grill, I had a partial view of the hallway and the ballast control station where Simon had to check in regularly. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried to steady my breathing, to force my mind to work like the Navy tech I used to be. Assess the situation, identify the threat, formulate a response. That thing from the Chimera. It wasn't just some germ or chemical weapon. It was something feeding on human consciousness, on existence itself, and it had followed us back to the ship. I thought about David, his laugh, his constant whining about the awful mess hall food, the picture of his little girl he kept in his wallet, all gone, not just dead, erased, like he'd never been at all. And Captain Finch, his firm handshake when he recruited me, the way he'd paced the bridge during tense moments, that giant coffee mug he carried everywhere, the one that said, "World's okayest captain." All of that was wiped out too, replaced by Simon's blank stare and his insistence that it had always been just the two of us alone out here. I tried to recall the rest of the crew, listing them off in my head. This mission was supposed to have 12 people. But now, trying to picture them, only vague impressions came. How many engineers were on board? 2? Or was it 3? What was our medical officer's name? I could see her face, but her name wouldn't come. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. It wasn't just about others forgetting. My own memories were starting to unravel. Through the grill, I watched Simon walk past. He moved with purpose, checking gauges and making notes on his tablet. Nothing strange about his actions at all, except his calm acceptance that our impossible situation was perfectly normal. He was a stranger wearing a friend's uniform, calmly doing his job on a ship that should have held 10 others. As I watched him, I felt something strange, a light tugging at the very edges of my thoughts. Subtle at first, like trying to remember a fading dream. Then it got stronger, becoming an intense pressure behind my eyes. A pulling, as if something was trying to suck my mind right out through my skull. I bit down hard on my knuckle to keep quiet. The pain helped sharpen my focus, fighting the intruding feeling. The entity wasn't random, it was methodical. I saw the pattern now. It was eating the connections between people. It took David first, cutting that tie. Then it wiped out the link connecting me to Captain Finch. Now it was working on the final bond, the one between Simon and me. I concentrated fiercely on specific memories, desperate to lock them in. The briefing before the dive, the manifest I'd signed, the shore crew who helped us load the Triton 4. But the details were turning foggy already. Were there 4 dock workers or 5? Did we launch at 6 in the morning or 8? Faces smudged together, names slipped away like water. I pressed my palms hard against my temples, like I could physically cram the memories back into place. This wasn't low oxygen or nitrogen narcosis. This was deliberate, a focused attack on my mind. The pressure kept building, threatening to drown me. I could feel myself fading, pieces of who I was dissolving. Who was I before the Navy? Where did I grow up? I had a sister, didn't I? Or was it a brother? Through the grill, I saw Simon stop what he was doing. He tilted his head slightly, listening to something I couldn't hear. Then slowly he turned to face the maintenance locker. Our eyes met through the narrow slats of the vent screen. He smiled, but his eyes stayed cold and dead. "Patrick? Are you in there? I think we need to talk." The way he said my name froze my blood solid. It wasn't a question of if I'd be next anymore. It was only a matter of when. I pressed myself against the back wall of the maintenance locker. The metal shelves bit into my spine, but I couldn't move. Not with Simon blocking the doorway, his face a plaster cast of false concern. "I'm fine," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Just running checks on the emergency gear." Simon's head cocked like a bird spotting movement. "Nothing but spare parts and cleaning stuff in there, Patrick. You know that." My lie was thin, but I needed time to think, to plan my next move. "I'm worried about you," Simon continued, that unnerving calm still dripping off his words. "You've been off since we came back from the Chimera, talking about people who aren't real." That phrase, "aren't real," crawled into my bones like frost. I knew the script, saw it play out with David, with Captain Finch, with all the others bleeding out of my head like watercolors. Simon gripped the doorframe. "Come on out, let's get you sorted." The impact hit harder than depth charges. The Odyssey wasn't safe anymore. Whatever lived inside our stolen Soviet sub had nearly finished its work. I was the last loose end, the only mind that recalled reality before this thing started carving it up. Only one move left, the Triton 4. I shoved the door straight into him. Metal clanged as Simon stumbled back, caught mid-stride. Didn't wait to see if he fell, just ran. The hallway warped ahead like bad glass. Had it always stretched this far? Simon's footsteps kept rhythm behind me, steady, relentless. Not a hunter chasing prey, just a janitor sweeping away a glitch. "Patrick, where do you think you're going? Nowhere else to run, just the two of us." That echoed in my skull as I hit the launch bay. The Triton 4 hung ready in its cradle. Hands moved without thought. Start-up sequence, systems check, hydro locks disengaged, training taking over. Simon filled the doorway, every scrap of warmth leached from his expression. Running won't help. Only thing that helps is letting go. I slammed the hatch shut an instant before his fingertips brushed the seal. Through the viewport, nothing human looked back. Just focused efficiency, a man deleting corrupted data. Pressure seals hissed. The display flickered awake. My eyes locked on the crew manifest glowing on screen. One name, P. Klein. Always like that? Impossible. I felt David's shoulder bump mine during our descent. Heard the recycled air rasp in his throat as he joked about the pressure squeezing his bones. Now I floated blind through ink-black water, the Odyssey's lights dwindling beneath me like dying stars. Didn't know if I'd outrun that thing or carried it with me. The last witness, carrying ghosts in my head. Then the darker thought, colder than the trench we'd left. What if the ghosts were always just me?